적인 권위자로 알려져.
The future of Seoul, the future of our countries, the future of how we live. That is in our hands, and that's why the interesting thing is, as we were saying before, how to use a lab approach to collectively and together think about the future, and that's what we do at Sensible City Lab. That is MIT in Boston. You see Boston on the other side. You see the river. We're just, our office, our lab is just over there. We also have a few labs around the world. Of course, the main one is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We got, since last year, lab in Milan, in Dubai, in Amsterdam, in Stockholm, and in Singapore. Hopefully, we'll be able to collaborate and work with you in Seoul. Also, sometimes with our office, we turn this into architecture, but that's kind of a different story, how research into cities can become building and design. Now, what is the starting point? The starting point is what you see here. The cities are so important for our planet. If you enter the surface of the planet, but they're 55% of the population, 75% of energy consumption, 80% of CO2 emissions. So if we can do something to make our cities a bit more sustainable, well, that can be a big deal globally. And it is particularly important today when we look at what is happening on the planet. If you look at this, these are temperatures, median temperatures on the planet since 1940. And you see that since until the 1970s and early 80s, things were quite static. But then look at what happened. Look at last year, for the first time, we went beyond 1.6 degrees, which is what the UN in Paris with the Paris Agreement has set as one of the key targets. And last year some people were saying, well, this might be because of the Nino, but if you look at this, after the Nino you go La Nina, usually temperatures go down, but actually what happened just last month is that we got La Nina and temperatures still going up. So somehow this is a key thing we all need to look at when we look at the future on our planet. And today we're talking about AI. Well, AI starts from data. We got the city, the physical city, the city made of data. And the AI can be something that can help make our cities more sustainable, even if AI itself, some types of AI like LLMs are using huge amount of energy. That's a different conversation we should have. But basically AI applies to data, can help make our cities more sustainable. That's, by the way, it's the logo from our lab at MIT, the digital and the physical, and in the middle, all what happens in the city. Like the digital, like a digital twin, and the physical that you see there, which is the physical city we know. So, today I decided to focus on infrastructure. I know that the city of Seoul is very interested in many dimensions of AI, but I decided to show you some projects about the infrastructure. And there's many examples. We usually think cities works regardless of what we do, but sometimes pieces of infrastructure fail. If you look at this, it's actually when waste management fails. And that's what you get into the city. Normally we don't see that, but that's what happens. When power fails, this was the US just a few years ago, whole neighborhoods without power and everything stuck. When traffic management fails, this was in China, it was over a week of traffic jam that happened a few years ago. Or the same, this was again the US, when you got issues with other types of infrastructure, or with bridge and road infrastructure. So AI can help us to monitor and take care better of all the infrastructure we have in our cities. And then I want to share with you this, for instance, some work we've been doing by looking at roads and bridges and see how they can be monitored better. I showed before an example, but if this is another example in Southern Europe of a bridge that collapsed just 6 or 7 years ago. And that is nothing new. This was actually the first video taken by a famous bridge. If any of you has studied civil engineering, you know the name of this bridge. Anybody knows it? Well, it's the Tacoma Bridge. And the Tacoma Bridge was one of the first bridges where the collapse was filmed. It was at the time before cell phone, but there was a guy with a camera. And actually that helped to understand collapse of bridges and change the design of suspension bridges. What happened here is actually because of wind, the bridge started resonating and then it collapsed. But I'll tell you another story, which is at this bridge. This bridge is called the Longfellow Bridge. It's next to MIT. You saw MIT before looking at Boston. Here we are on the other side and looking at Cambridge. And Longfellow Bridge is the bridge where I was going every day back and forth. And then one day they closed it. They had to rebuild it because it was about to collapse. And the reason is that today, if you want to monitor a bridge, you do one of the two things there. You either put sensors, as you see to the left, or you send people. But in both cases, the cost is very big. It can cost you in the United States or in Europe $500,000 or €500,000 to monitor one bridge per 1 year. Now, what you get when you monitor a bridge, you're getting the vibration of the bridge. And so our idea was now our smartphones can measure vibrations, our cars can measure vibrations. So what about using that to monitor infrastructure? And we started from a very well-known bridge. Which bridge is this? Yes, the Golden Gate. So that's the Golden Gate, and the reason we picked the Golden Gate is that the Golden Gate is very well known and understood, and so if you do research, you got a lot of what people call ground truth. So you know exactly how it behaves, so the data you collect can actually be compared with what you already know about it. And then we started going back and forth across the Golden Gate Bridge, hundreds of times. After 100 times, the San Francisco police stopped us and told us to stop. They, started being concerned about what we were doing. But we collected the data, and as you see here, that's the basic data. And it turns out that when you analyze it in different ways, I'll show you the paper in a moment. If some of you want to look at the mathematics, you can see it in the paper. But when you look at it, then you can actually get the same data that you collect from sensors on the bridge. You can get by looking at all the smartphones of thousands and thousands of people going across the bridge every day. This is actually data we collected with Uber and with the Uber app of all the Uber cars going back and forth on the bridge. And here is the paper. If you're interested, you find all the papers, by the way, on our website. You can download it from free if you want to look at the mathematics. Now, I'll give you another example. It's a paper that will be published in a few weeks, and it actually looks at optic fiber in our cities. Our cities are filled, they're full of cables of optic fiber. And it turns out that then if you actually put a small unit and send laser and look at backscattering, you can actually use that with these very precise sensors to look at vibration. And when you got the data, you can do what people do with geophysics. You can use the data to actually look at sources of noise in the city. And you can do that with one fiber for tens or up to 100 kilometers. And so if you look at this, you see actually how we looked at in San Diego. This is some research we've been doing with colleagues at Stanford. And you look at San Diego, we look at some optic fiber, and then we analyze it with different type of signal processing and AI. And what you get, you're able, by looking at the fiber, to see where every train or every car, even to the level of small noise in the city, you're able to monitor it at the scale of the entire city. So this becomes a great way to better understand dimensions of the city. If you're interested, you find the paper at the moment on Archive. Some of you who's not in research, Archive is like where people put what is called preprints before something is printed, but this is going to be published in Nature Communications in just a few weeks. Or the other thing we can do in cities is actually collect data from cities. And we can use our own sensors to do that. Look at this. This is Cambridge, Massachusetts. And we started mounting sensors on garbage trucks. And let me tell you, we discovered two things. One thing is only with 3 garbage trucks, we could collect data and scan every road in the city of Seoul at least once a week. That's quite impressive. Only 3 sensors moving there, it gets you a lot of data. And then the second thing we discovered is actually by sharing data with citizens, citizens started analyzing and then taking action. So the most beautiful thing, we heard it from the president Kim, president of the foundation before, about how basically by sharing data, you can start interesting feedback loop with people. And so here is how we've been starting to deploy this in different cities, in Boston, in other cities. Here you with just a few sensors, you collect a lot of data about the city, and it becomes this idea of high resolution or hyper-local sensing. It can be air quality, it can be many other things. Incidentally, you find also very interesting mathematics in this. So this is a paper, if you're